What's really going on in Afghanistan? Joe Biden's pullout game is about as weak as his son, Hunter Biden's. Hey guys, my name is Jason Wesley, and this is another episode of Not a Podcast.
President Obama issued a statement commending the decision, saying it was time to turn the page.
Joe Biden not only made the right decision, but he framed it as not just the end of our true presence in Afghanistan, but the end of a particular kind of period that began on 9/11.
I think the president did the right thing.
President Biden is taking this kind of methodically and thoughtfully.
President Joe Biden, he knows what he's talking about, certainly.
More than long awaited, and it's just, it's a historic moment.
Well, since the war in Afghanistan began, the death toll as of April has been 2,442 troops, 5,506 contractors or allied troops, aid workers, and journalists, 66,000 Afghan forces, and 47,245 civilians. Joe Biden suddenly withdraws all troops from Afghanistan, and the Taliban takes over almost immediately, even though the Secretary of Defense assured us that it wouldn't happen quickly.
Austin, on Afghanistan, are you concerned that as the Taliban gain ground, that al-Qaeda will be able to move back in and be able to strengthen enough to attack the West? And if so, can you give us a sense of how long any estimates are before they will be able to have that capability?
You heard me say a while back that, my rough estimate was that it would take 2 years for them to develop that kind of capability, and that it was a medium risk. I've not changed my...
But within days, the Taliban started taking over. Joe Biden said it wouldn't be anything like Saigon, where helicopters would be lifting people off of buildings.
Do you see any parallels between this withdrawal and what happened in Vietnam, with some people feeling...
None whatsoever. Zero. What you had entire brigades breaking through the gates of our embassy. 6, if I'm not mistaken. The Taliban is not the North Vietnamese army. They're not remotely comparable in terms of capability. There's going to be no circumstance where you see people being lifted off the roof of a embassy of the United States from Afghanistan. It is not at all comparable.
But then we saw helicopters lifting people off of buildings and the airport being overran with people risking their life hanging on to a plane to have a way out before the Taliban kills them. The Taliban quickly began collecting equipment like helicopters and weapons. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan responded to a question about this during a press conference.
We don't have a complete picture, obviously, of where every article of defense materials has gone, but certainly a fair amount of it has fallen into the hands of the Taliban. And obviously, we don't have a sense that they are going to readily hand it over to us at the airport.
Jake Sullivan was also asked why Biden ignored intelligence reports.
The president yesterday said the situation in Afghanistan unfolded more quickly than anticipated. You said it yourself just a few moments ago. But numerous officials have told ABC that there were key intelligence assessments warning the Taliban could overwhelm the country and take the capital within weeks. Did the White House disregard that intelligence and push ahead?
I'm not actually familiar with the intelligence assessments you're describing.
The Taliban began murdering people that supported Americans or had Western phone numbers and started torturing translators. Here are Afghan girls begging soldiers to help them leave because they know they'll be killed or turned into sex slaves. And after several days of vacation at Camp David, Joe Biden decided to address the nation and blame everyone else from Trump to the Afghan people.
When I came into office, I inherited a deal that President Trump negotiated with the Taliban. Under his agreement, U.S. forces would be out of Afghanistan by May 1, 2021, just a little over 3 months after I took office. U.S. forces had already drawn down during the Trump administration from roughly 15,500 American forces to 2,500 troops in country. There was no status quo of stability without American casualties after May 1. There was only the cold reality of either following through on the agreement to withdraw our forces or escalating the conflict and sending thousands more American troops back into combat in Afghanistan, lurching into the third decade of conflict. I stand squarely behind my decision. There's some very brave and capable Afghan special forces units and soldiers. But if Afghanistan is unable to mount any real resistance to the Taliban now, there is no chance that 1 year, 1 more year, 5 more years, or 20 more years of U.S. military boots on the ground would have made any difference. We talked extensively about the need for Afghan leaders to unite politically. They fail to do any of that. I also urge them to engage in diplomacy, to seek a political settlement with the Taliban. This advice was flatly refused. I know there are concerns about why we did not begin evacuating Afghan civilians sooner. Part of the answer is some of the Afghans did not want to leave earlier, still hopeful for their country. And part of it because the Afghan government and its supporters discouraged us from organizing a mass exodus to avoid triggering, as they said, a crisis of confidence.
Then he said there's nothing that we could do for the country before he turned his back and didn't even take any questions.
The events we're seeing now are sadly proof that no amount of military force would ever deliver a stable, united, secure Afghanistan, as known in history as the graveyard of empires. What's happening now could just as easily happen 5 years ago or 15 years in the future. Thank you. May God protect our troops, our diplomats, and all brave Americans serving in harm's way.
Even Jake Tapper with CNN couldn't take it anymore and called out the administration as being inept.
And as you know, the Taliban has closed in on Kabul. We're evacuating the embassy, burning documents. Biden increased troops deploying to the country twice in 3 days just to rescue those there. This is not just about the overall idea of leaving Afghanistan. This is about leaving hastily and ineptly. Secretary Blinken, how did President Biden get this so wrong? But I think, again, the issue here is not just the withdrawal of U.S. forces. It's how they were withdrawn, the rapidity, the hastiness. President Obama's former ambassador to Afghanistan, Ryan Crocker, he called the way this was done, quote, a handover to the Taliban, and, quote, we have hung them out to dry about the Afghan people. Crocker continued, quote, I'm left with some grave questions in my mind about Biden's ability to lead our nation as commander-in-chief. To have read this so wrong, or even worse, to have understood what was likely to happen and not care, unquote. Does President Biden not bear the blame for this disastrous exit?
Now, this note went out to American citizens requesting to be evacuated. To American citizens, thank you for registering your request to be evacuated from Afghanistan. The U.S. Embassy in Afghanistan has confirmed that an undefined number of U.S. government-provided flights will begin soon. Please make your way to Hamid Karzai International Airport at this time. Please be advised that the U.S. government cannot guarantee your security as you make this trip. Oh, wait, you mean this airport?
biggest problem is getting here. Because outside the perimeter, the Taliban are in control. The U.S. military asked them to keep back the crowds, but the Taliban are doing it their way. Firing in the air, sometimes beating Afghans who try to approach.
An Afghan interpreter that worked with U.S. forces says Mr. Joe Biden broke his promise.
But now I lost my fingers in the war. The Taliban, they cut my fingers off, they cut my bodies, all that. I got a lot of shrapnels. I worked for Navy SEALs, U.S. Marines in Afghanistan. But right now, the Taliban, they are hunting my family. The Taliban, they just cut my cousin Nick off couple days ago. That they moved from Baghlan province to Kabul, and they are hunting my family. And I'm asking from Mr. Joe Biden that he broke his promise and he left my family and other American allies behind.
And this woman cried out saying something very similar.
Biden, listen to me carefully. You destroyed not Afghanistan, but the world. Taliban are best friends with Al-Qaeda and ISIS. All they're gonna do, use our land to build our resources, to build and to destroy the world. You right now, you are on vacation and our country was burning and bleeding to death while you're on vacation. And you call yourself a president?
But when confronted by George Stephanopoulos about it, he brushed it off because it was like 4 or 5 days ago.
We've all seen the pictures. We've seen those hundreds of people packed into a C-17. We've seen Afghans falling.
That was 4 days ago, 5 days ago.
What did you think when you first saw those pictures?
What I thought was we have to gain control of this. We have to move this more quickly. We have to move in a way in which we can take control of that airport. And we did.
So you don't think this could have been handled, this actually could have been handled better in any way? No mistakes?
No, I don't think it could have been handled in a way that we're going to go back in hindsight and look, but the idea that somehow there's a way to have gotten out without chaos ensuing, I don't know how that happens.
Now, former President Trump came out with a response to everything, and this is what he had to say about the plan.
Now, what we were going to do just very quickly is we were going to take the military out last, okay, last. The people were coming out, they were going to come out, but the agreement was violated, so I held things back because we weren't going to do anything, again, conditions-based. So they weren't fulfilling their obligations and conditions. But here's just to finish. The people come out first. Then I was going to take all of the military equipment. We have billions and billions of dollars worth of new Black Hawk helicopters, brand new, that Russia now will be examining, and so will China, and so will everybody else to figure it because it's the greatest in the world. We have brand new Army tanks and all sorts of equipment, missiles. We have everything. I was going to take it out because I knew they weren't going to fight. Just one thing, and I have to say, and this is different from everyone else, I said, why are they fighting? Why are these Afghan soldiers fighting against the Taliban? And I was told some very bad information by a lot of different people. The fact is, they're among the highest paid soldiers in the world. They were doing it for a paycheck because once we left, they stopped fighting. So all of the people that talk about the bravery and everything, I say everybody's brave. But the fact is, our country was paying the Afghan soldiers a fortune. So we were sort of bribing them to fight. And that's not what it's all about. It's a great thing that we're getting out, but nobody has ever handled a withdrawal worse than Joe Biden.
But hey, it's a diverse administration where people were hired because of sexual identity and race and not because of qualifications. I mean, that's the whole reason why Biden chose Kamala Harris in the first place, right?
I would pick a woman to be my vice president.
You just committed here tonight that your running mate, if you get the nomination, will be a woman?
Yes.
He's already facing significant pressure to pick a woman of color.
This is a kind of strategy that Joe Biden and his campaign need to keep in mind and have a woman of color on the ticket.
And speaking of Kamala, Vice President Kamala Harris reportedly refused to stand alongside Joe Biden as he addressed the nation on the Afghanistan chaos, allegedly saying, "You will not pin this on me." Well, you do have culpability, Kamala. You said you were the last one in the room and you supported the decision.
He just made a really big decision. Afghanistan.
Yes.
Were you the last person in the room?
Yes.
And you feel comfortable?
I do.
Kind of sounds like Hillary when she was asked about Benghazi.
But
and the American people could have known that within days, and they didn't know that.
With all due respect, the fact is we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make?
So our elected officials either didn't see this coming or are just inept, or they knew it would be the outcome and did it anyways because they wanted this to happen. Laura Logan addresses that in this clip.
It always comes down to one thing, one or two things. And in this case, in Afghanistan, this comes down to the fact that the United States wants this outcome. Whoever's in power right now, whoever's really pulling the strings, and I don't know that, they could do anything they want to change this, and they're not. The United States government could change this even today, and they don't do it. They don't use the leverage they have with Pakistan. They'll give you 5,000 reasons, but it doesn't matter. Well, they're not addressing right now. You know what they're not addressing? All of the Al-Qaeda and other Islamic terrorist literature and communications that they're picking up that are celebrating this as a massive defeat. They're not talking about why the Taliban are dismantling advanced U.S. military equipment and sending it back over the border to Pakistan. And worse, they're not stopping it. Why don't... We are, the NSA and the National Geospatial Agency, which controls the satellites, and all of these other arms of the United States government are watching this happen in real time. They are seeing advanced U.S. military equipment going over the border into Iran and going into Pakistan, and they're doing nothing to stop it.
Now, with all that being said, I believe impeachment and resignations should be on the table.
Will you be my alibi?